Hello, my name is Kai, and I'm a bit of a rambler. I like to travel, learn, and tell stories. And I want to keep telling the story about urban camping in Taiwan, which has turned into much more of a rant than I thought it was, or a ramble, I should say. I forgot I had this many stories. So anyway, we left off with Mrs. Robinson yoo-hooing at my hammock at 9 in the morning. And I woke up to, hello? Hi, hello? And Mrs. Robinson isn't her real name, obviously. She is Taiwanese, but her name fits. And I woke up to someone talking to me, and I was like, oh no, they're going to kick me off the beach. And I just looked out at whoever it was outside my hammock because I can see through the hammock, and I tried to outweight them. But they weren't moving. They were just staying there. She's like, hello. And I opened and came out and said, good morning, popped my head out of the hammock. And she said, hi, I've noticed you sleeping here. Are you sleeping on the beach? And I was like, I camp here like every day. She was like, oh, that's fantastic. I love camping. It's so much fun, isn't it? And I was like, yeah, it is really fun. Like, I'm having a great time. And we just had a nice conversation. And at the end of it, it was kind of extended for me. She was older, I'll say 55, 60, something like that. And she told me about she always did yoga on the beach and then rode her bike. She had like those fat tire bikes. She had one of those. So she told me about her morning routine, rode her bike around, but she'd seen me on the beach for the past couple weeks and finally decided to ask who I was and like what I was doing. And so after our morning salutations, she said, and if you ever want to come by and get some tea, you can come by and have tea with me. I think it would be nice. And she said it innocently enough, but there was just something about the way she was looking at me and the fact that she was inviting a stranger man into her home. It just seemed like there was some undercurrent of attraction or utilitarian action. I don't know how to say it correctly. Because it wasn't romance. It just seemed like she was interested in having a man in her house. But she said it innocently enough, and I was like, it's not too weird, and she's not gonna like attack me, so whatever. And I told her yes, and she like insisted on giving me her address and told me I could come by at 2 or something like that, and gave me a time and everything. And in hindsight, it was much more Mrs. Robinson a situation, but at the time it all happened in this blur. I was like, that's weird. Is she hitting on me, or does she just want to have tea? And I'm still in the middle of my first urban camping adventure. There's just a lot going on in my mind, so I'm not clocking things as you do with the benefit of hindsight. And she wasn't unattractive, but she was much older than me, double my age, and I wasn't a spring chicken myself. So I like the fact that she said yoga and she exercised every day, but I just didn't know if I was up for senior afternoon delight. But I spent that day just thinking about it, and I walked around playing Pokemon Go, recharging my phone, probably having one of those great breakfast burritos. And then I was like, what the heck? Just go say hello. Just see what it is, which is how I deal with most situations. I just wanted to find out what the outcome of this situation would be. So I walked in the direction of her neighborhood, and then I found her hutong, and then I was there, and there was her building, and that was the number that she gave me, painted on it, her address. So I rang the bell, and she answered. I said, hey, it's Kai from the beach hammock. And she was, oh, hello, come in, please. Oh, it's so nice to see you. And she was very excited. And I went inside, and she had a very nice home. It was very well apportioned. Glass tile floors, but not fancy, just like comfortable tile. And there was God, looking back on this, it's really funny. I was so unsure of whether or not she was looking for afternoon delight, because now it really seems like that's what she was going for. Because there was a coffee table set up and a love seat in front of the coffee table, and there were chairs and stuff in other parts of the room, but she must have moved them, because the main entry hall, the entry room, which was most of the house, was completely, everything was near the walls except for this one coffee table and one love seat she put in front of the coffee table. It was very casually arranged, again, just like her tone, very casual, but it just all pointed toward afternoon delight. And she was courteous. She didn't try and make out with me right away or anything. And we just started talking about my travels and all this kind of stuff. And she sat down right next to me, very close, I thought, for if this was a non-afternoon delight scenario, then that would be sitting pretty close. But if this was afternoon delight, then what's happening is just what I kept thinking. I kept going back and forth. I was like, is this or is it? And in hindsight, I believe, yes, she was trying to get a man in her house for some fun. But I just couldn't resolve things in my mind. And I'm on my first backpacking adventure, so there's too many things, I think, going on for me to resolve. But she asked if I wanted some tea, and I was like, yeah, that would be great. Because what are we doing here? she brought out some tea. I think she asked if I want to eat something. Maybe she had some like biscuits or crackers or whatever. And I was like, wow, these are good crackers. And she gave the tea, and the tea was really tasty. I was like, holy cow, this is like, and it was a very deep blue color, which I had never seen before. It was a bright blue, a bright deep blue. It was a very interesting color. And I was like, man, this is really good tea. Like, I don't actually drink that much tea, but this is great. She was like, oh, it's so-and-so tea. It's really great. It's very healthy. It makes you strong. And I think she said it was special or something like that. And I don't know if the blue tea has already given you the hint, but if you know of other medicine that's blue, what is that famous medicine called? Viagra, the blue pill medicine. I didn't even make that connection at the time, but I didn't need to, because the blue tea she gave me had that stimulating effect. And I was like, what is happening? And I even looked at her to like gauge her countenance. But like I said, she acted very casual. And I believe now she was waiting for me to make a move. And I wanted to, but I'm very suspicious of impulses, even though I follow most of my impulses, even after I'm suspicious of them. When I was so suddenly excited about this lady, right after I had this blue tea, I like looked at the tea and I thinking about how I felt, and I was like, this is crazy. And I went in the bathroom and I was like, yeah, this is like a medical situation. Like, this isn't a natural occurring interest. And I decided not to pursue it, but I almost couldn't help myself with this blue tea coursing through my veins. And I didn't even make the connection between the blue tea and the little blue pill, Viagra, later on. What is the active ingredient in that? Hang on a second. Sildenafil citrate. Okay, it's a synthetic compound. This was definitely from a blue flower that she told me about at the time, but I didn't remember a lot of it because there was a lot going on and the situation was so bizarre anyway. I was like seriously considering doing that. That's how crazy my brain had been taken over by, I assume, the tea, because I've never been that rearing to go for no reason with someone I wasn't particularly physically attracted to. She wasn't physically unattractive, but I wasn't crazy about her right out of the gate. But I kept my mind and my pants on, and I walked out and just kept talking to her. And she showed me a photo album with her children in it, like her grown children. And I was like, well, wait, that's her grown son. Why would she be trying to hit on me and drug me with aphrodisiac tea if she's going to show me family pictures of her son? But my interest continued for hours. After I left her apartment and walked around, I was like, what the heck is going on? And I looked up every tea in the world. It ended with me not making a move on her and her not making a move on me. And I think maybe she was like hoping for some kind of organic move making. But I was just too put off by the indirectness of the situation and the many factors that I couldn't explain, the unexplainable nature of the situation as well. So after we had afternoon tea for a couple hours, I thanked her and I left awkwardly, and she casually, but not naturally casually, I feel like, said goodbye and I should come by for tea again. And I was like, okay, but I can't remember if I did. I think I was only in town for another few days after that, and I may not have. I definitely talked to her on the beach again. She stopped by every other day just to say hello in the morning and see how I was doing and ask if I wanted to come by for tea again. But I was there for another week, and then I left town, and I didn't see her again. So I almost got Mrs. Robinson, I'm pretty sure. And I'm pretty sure she drugged me with, I don't think it was a synthetic, I just think she knew, like, this is the tea that gets guys interested. And she was right. That tea was amazing. And I wish I could remember the name of it, or I had written it down or something. But I looked up every tea, and I finally came across this one bright but deeply blue-colored tea made from butterfly pea, PEA, not urine, like snap pea cousin, the butterfly pea, the vegetable, and it comes out as a bright blue. It's made from butterfly pea flowers. And one of the pages I was reading mentioned something about increasing blood flow, and maybe it is used as an aphrodisiac. And I was like, that's it? And I'm still not sure if it was, but it looks just like, if you look up butterfly pea flower tea, you'll see this bright blue tea that I couldn't help but connect. There must have been, it was either in that, it had to be in that, because that was the only thing I drank. And I was vigorously interested in her. A minute after I drank the tea, in stark contrast to a minute before I drank the tea. That was a bizarre encounter that I look back on with fondness still. And I always think, what if? What if? Can't go wrong with yoga, I always say. So that was one of my last experiences in that town. I might have even gone back for tea again because I was so curious about the entire encounter. I'm still curious about it 10 years later. And I didn't because I was exploring a new part of the town. And there was a pizza place, like a Western pizza place. And the proprietor was sitting outside. So I introduced myself to the guy and asked him how the pizza was. And he was like, it's great. I own this place. And I was like, oh, okay. And I did get a pizza, and he was right. It was really great. It was like, it tasted very Italian. I think he had been to Italy or something. He had something in his history where he worked with pizza before. I can't remember exactly what it was, and I took zero notes of everything during this time. But it was great pizza, and I told him about my travels and what I was doing and how I was urban camping for the first time, and maybe I would just keep traveling. And he was like, "That's so cool. Let's talk more." And we kept talking. I think he had beer there also. So I had great pizza, a beer, and then I said I was going to get, because I had to explore this next neighborhood. And he said, "Well, come by after I close down. We can just hang out and have a beer." And I did. I went over to his pizza place after the beer and talked with him a little bit. And it was very fine. And then his friend showed up and they were both going out to somewhere, but I wasn't interested in going with them. Like, I was carrying a rucksack. I think they were going to a club. And I was just like, nah, have fun, and I'll see you guys later. And I ate a couple more pizzas, I think that week at that guy's restaurant, because it was so good the first time. But what I was pretty excited about was that I found a little Shichong market, one of those outdoor markets. In China, they'll usually have like a big open courtyard space, and there's just 100 stalls like in a big circle or square in a courtyard. And in Taiwan, they usually had them down alleys. So one of the hutongs would be completely taken up, or multiple hutongs, could be a kilometer long, by folding tables and chairs and stalls and all these kind of things. And I loved walking through them. And I was always looking for something new. And I always found something new. I mean, I found one that was just selling cookware sets like the ones I had. And I was like, ooh, is that one better? Ooh, should I buy it? I don't know. And the folding chopsticks, little packs, and all these kind of things. And then I found these little crispy sugar cookies with sugar frosting. Okay, well, I just spent an obscene amount of time looking for the cookies that I cannot find. So I don't know the name now, and it's going to bug me for weeks. But they're small, centimeter to centimeter and a half, puffy sugar cookies that are crunchy, with a little drop of multicolored frosting, sugar frosting, confectioner sugar frosting. And they're like white or pink or green or yellow. And it's my favorite cookie, still. And every market has them in Taiwan. I've seen them around parts of Thailand also, so I think they're across Asia, and I think I've seen them in Japan. But in Taiwan, you can get a bag of 100 or 200 of them. And sometimes I would just buy a bag of those cookies and munch them down. Oh my gosh, I just looked for them again. I don't know what they're called. I knew what they were called before, but now it's been too long. I did find the name of that Taiwanese egg dish, which is just danbing. Very tasty. Fluffy crepe. So I found my favorite cookies in the world, and that was a very satisfying development. And then I continued walking around the town for the next few days, made excuses as why not to go visit Mrs. Robinson again. Tried a few of the local sandwiches, cooked around town, I remember that. And then I decided to leave Hualien because I had been living there for close to 2 months. And while I loved the vegetarian Buddhist restaurant, and these are my favorite cookies, and all the mountains, didn't mention the mountains. So the spot I was in Hualien is so great because it's right next to a really nice beach, but behind it, less than a mile away, are really sloping, forested, beautiful mountains. And I spent a lot of time back there in those mountains. They maybe took an hour to backpack to because they were in the middle of nowhere and there's switchbacks to get up there and all that. But I really liked the towns, so when I got bored hanging around in town or by the beach, I would just walk an hour outside of town up into the mountains and walk to all the different little towns up there. And I didn't find anything remarkable, but there was always some kids playing basketball in these enormous pavilions that I have no idea why they were up there, because there was no population centers, just a few mountain towns, and then giant concrete, like with electricity and outlets, stages and courtyards with basketball courts and stuff. I never saw anything other than a few grandparents with their grandchildren and some teenagers shooting hoops, though. So I think I only went up there 3 or 4 times, but the mountains were really nice. And then there were closer mountains around the city itself that there were hiking trails, and they were a little more frequented by joggers and hikers and stuff. And I climbed all of those also. But I had seen pretty much everything I had on my map that I had planned to check out. And then all of the new stuff, I had seen all that too. Like there were a few of my favorite spots. There was a little market with taco, like TAKO balls, those little fried balls of dough with octopus inside that are pretty great. Just like a little half arts and crafts and half local Taiwanese snacks. Maybe 10 vendors, but they always showed up every day, and went there a few times. There were just a few spots that I like to hang out at. There's this huge overpass that was disused or something, and it covered this river I like to go on. There were a lot of rivers in that town. Oh wait, the last thing I did was cook on a basketball court. I was so hungry, or a tennis court, I think it was. Yeah. And I was trying to find a place to eat dinner, and I decided to just cook curry because I was starving, and I had curry and noodles and everything in my bag. And I couldn't find anywhere to cook, so I just set up my little stove on the corner of a tennis court as soon as it got dark enough that most people wouldn't see me. But everyone saw me because it was right next to a school that I didn't realize was there, so students kept walking by while I was cooking my curry, and no one cared, like it was fine. But it was just funny because I thought I was being sneaky by doing it in the corner of like an old abandoned park, but I must have just arrived for the 5 minutes that no one was there, because for the 10 minutes I was cooking, there was people constantly walking by. And then I had my great dinner. Okay, so I moved on from Hualien after that, and I was sad to go. I missed my familiar alleyways that I walked every day. I was walking easily 20 miles a day most days, because I'd walk from one end of the city to the other. Like my little town ended and then the city center, and I would just walk through the whole thing, and then I'd walk all the way back when I needed to charge my phone back in the town. And 8 hours a day walking, easy, sure. That makes total sense to me. Probably more a lot of the days. I was really into Pokemon Go. I got to the maximum level. I got to like, the maximum used to be 40, so I got to 39 and a half. And then they started instituting all these pay-for-play things, and I was like, well, I'm not going to even get the top score now then. Pokemon Go, he said accusingly. I bought my new phone there that I said charged super fast. That was how I found out about Oppo, that brand, the Taiwanese brand that was acquired by a Chinese company. Really interesting company for a little while there. Oh, and that was 10 years ago, that phone, and that's how I discovered how far ahead Asia was. Like, I was using the HTC, and I got that in the States, but that was a pretty standard, in terms of the internal hardware, flagship phone at the time, whereas the Oppo had the fastest charging on the market, basically, and it wasn't even USB-C based. It was a proprietary micro USB technology developed by Oppo. It had 8 gigabytes of RAM. That was at the time Apple phones still had 2 or 4 gigabytes of RAM. It had an included 512 gigabytes of memory with expandable SDXC micro SD card up to 4 terabytes, which is crazy. It just had all modern features of today, but it had them 10 years ago. Oppo was ahead of the game with their phones. Now, all their new phones are not great. They're not bad. They're whatever. They're fine. But they're in line with everybody else now. 10 years ago, they were ahead of the game. Like HTC was, but like moderately. The Oppo was a huge hardware acceleration. The only problem was their operating system was terrible, just bloated and a real pain in the butt. However, that didn't bother me too much because I played with my HTC 10, I think, in the rain so much that it died after a while. It spontaneously died, and I'm assuming it's because I was walking around in the Taiwanese rain playing Pokemon Go 12 hours a day. And then running back to the park and recharging it as it went down, and then, goes down to 10, I recharge it to 100, I walk around, play for another 4 hours, and then go back and recharge it. And I did that for like a month, so I think the hardware just failed, especially walking around in that super humid, salty, ocean, rainy air. But because of that, I went to the phone store and asked them which one was good, and the guy was like, that one, and he pointed at the Oppo. And he told me about the charging and how fast it was, and I was like, what? I've never heard of a phone that fast. And he turned it on, and he was like, here. And it said like 68. So he plugged it in, and he said, just watch it. And it bipped to 69, and then bipped to 70, and I was like, what the heck? And I pulled out my stopwatch and timed it. Yeah, and it was going up more than 1% a minute. And I was like, okay, that is pretty fast. Like, it looked about 2% per minute. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm sold. You sold me. That's good. So I checked out all the other features, and I mean, it worked. Everything worked on it. He told me that it had 8 gigabytes of RAM and the 512 gigabytes included with the expandable storage. And I was just like, yep, okay, I need a phone. Mine is completely dead. And so I went to the bank, took out some monies, and bought that phone. And it lasted a good long time, although the charging port eventually started to die. And then it did die, and that's just how things go. So I had my new phone. I still want to play Pokemon Go, and now I can do that around the entire island. And I walked the usual way I do across the whole city. Oh no, I didn't, because my suburb was on the south end. But that was the last thing I did. The next thing I did was start walking south. I was going to go clockwise around Taiwan. That was my plan. It should take me a couple weeks, and I was like, well, I've been walking every day, almost a marathon or more a day with this rucksack, so I should be able to make it all the way back up to Taipei and get my flight out of here by the time my visa expires. Oh, and while I wanted to start urban camping outside of Hualien, just because I had spent so much time in this one town of the island, part of it was just to see more, but a larger part of it was because the pilgrimage of Mazu was happening around that time in that season, where every year the people of Taiwan load the statue of Mazu, a water goddess, onto a palanquin and carry her around the island for like a week-long pilgrimage, or 2 weeks, something like that. And I thought that was so cool, and I wanted to walk around anyway, so that was my initial plan, walking around the entire island in a clockwise fashion. Didn't work out like that because I get distracted and interested in too many side routes. But that is a cool thing that Taiwanese people do every year. Carry their goddess of the sea, Mazu, around the island on a pilgrimage. And so I started walking, but I love exploring too much, and I didn't keep to my schedule, and I found these little towns, and everything was great. There was good food. I liked talking to people. I found such a good noodle shop, and they had jianjiao, the fried pot stickers, and even the steamed pot stickers were still delicious. So I lived there a couple days because there was a huge, huge park with a water park actually inside this park that people walked at every day. And during the day, I would get the danbing, that great egg omelet with the syrup I love. And then I would go walk around the park all day playing Pokemon Go. And everyone around me was also playing Pokemon Go. And I would see them flicking at their phones, and I'd look at them as I passed, and we were doing the exact same thing. So there was maybe like 50 other people in this pretty big park. It was set away from a lot of towns, so there weren't a ton of people in the park. But families came by, and people came by at different times. There was always, 50 even seems low, maybe 100 people at the park at any time. And everyone was just walking around on all the paths, catching all of these Pokemon. And I was too. And sometimes I even left my rucksack like behind a tree in this really nice little hidden place, so I wasn't really worried about anyone stumbling upon it or taking it, and I would just walk around myself. And one day I was walking around and a Taiwanese girl asked me if I was playing Pokemon Go. And I was like, yeah, you? Yeah. And we started talking and we exchanged Pokemon Go information. And we might have exchanged WeChat as well. I don't think we did. No, I think we just exchanged Pokemon Go information. And you can send each other gifts. And we did that for months, even after I left Taiwan, sent each other daily gifts. And it was nice having that connection with someone that I met. We just talked about regular stuff. Told her I was a teacher. She told me she was a business person, somewhere in a company. And it was great having that connection, but you can't send messages of any kind on Pokemon Go, or at least you couldn't at the time. So after a while, our friendship kind of petered out, and it would go down to a gift every 2 days, and then 3 days, and then a week, and then I stopped playing Pokemon Go entirely. But it was pretty cool just making these connections with Pokemon Go that I always heard about. And I was like, ooh, girls started talking to me because of my Pokemon video games. But that wasn't the coolest thing about this park. Well, the free bathrooms were pretty nice, and of course there's free water everywhere. But the water park at the center of the park, I was staying longer and longer in the park until sunset, because there was a place there was a couple trees, like a small park outside this giant park, because they locked these gates at night of this big park that everyone was in, I guess because the water park set up inside. And so I would leave when they were locking the gates, go eat dinner, buy a couple snacks, maybe a couple beers, and then find the smaller park that was outside of this bigger park. And I would set up my hammock there, sleep, and then I'd go back in the morning and keep walking around playing Pokemon Go or whatever the heck I was doing. Until one day, near the end of the day, at the end of the afternoon, I came upon the water park portion, and it's not a huge water park, but there's a few structures, and one of the gates was open, and so I walked up onto the second floor, and except for an entryway into a water slide, it was just a flat floor with a little cabinet. And inside the cabinet was a power strip, and I could plug into it, and it had power. So I didn't have to walk to the restaurant to charge my phone and eat food. I could just charge my phone right there. And then I realized I had been carrying my laptop around with me this whole time. And I was like, ooh, I can do stuff on my laptop. What should I do now that I can use my laptop for something? And I decided that I should get my TEFL certificate, Teaching English as a Foreign Language certificate, which offers so many advantages. There's a TEFL episode, but basically, you spend $37. There's this perpetual Groupon for TEFL Full Circle, and that's an internationally accredited certificate, so when you get it, all countries accept it. And once you have that certificate, you can teach at any school for English teachers at that point. You can always ask for the highest part of the pay scale, because that's the main requirement. It's just the best bargaining chip for anything having to do with English teaching. And it's lifetime, so it's once you get it, you just have it. There's so many benefits to having the TEFL certificate. And I taught English at the time. I was still teaching it online to those people who called me up. So I'm playing Pokemon Go around, and if someone calls me up, I'll talk to them for 20 or 30 minutes, still playing Pokemon Go the whole time, talking to them on my Bluetooth headset, and then I'd be like, okay, bye. And during that 30 minutes of, Pokemon, I made $5 or $6. And it was just pretty great, making $20 a day, playing Pokemon Go, meeting people. Fun. Just social interaction and a fun video game while getting exercise all day. So I decided to get the TEFL certificate because if I ever did go back to teaching, it would just be nice to have the certificate. Even though I had all the experience, it wouldn't really matter because experience is just as important in terms of job requirements as a TEFL certificate is. I would argue more important, but it would be nice to have it, just to be like, yep, here it is, and just point to it on my resume. You know what? I actually just remembered that's not why I got the TEFL certificate. The online platform I was teaching on, Palfish, because of a new government required that all of their teachers had TEFL certificates. And I was initially going to just stop teaching online, but then I found this course for only $37, and considering my current profession and professional experience, and all of those other benefits I just mentioned, plus a lifetime accreditation, I figured, yeah, why not? Might as well get it. That's why I got the TEFL certificate eventually. So I decided to get my TEFL certificate. And I went online, I found the one I mentioned, TEFL Full Circle. I looked at a bunch of companies, but TEFL Full Circle is fully online, offers up to 200-hour courses. You can choose different levels of expertise. I think I got the $160 one at the time because it was just the higher the number of hours the certificate says you learned, the better. If you only learned for 20 hours, then you don't know as much as the person who learned teaching English as a foreign language for 100 hours. So I got the 120 or 160 or whatever it was, and I started studying. So I would play Pokemon Go, earn a couple bucks from teaching English online or just having casual conversations online. And then in the evening, maybe at 4:30 p.m., 5 p.m., I would walk up when no one was around to the second floor of this water park, and they usually closed the gates, but I just hopped the gates of the stairs and walked up the stairs to the second floor, and then I would lie down and play on my phone until they did lock the gates and the whole park was closed, and then I had the park to myself, and I would plug in my laptop, and I would do maybe 1 or 2 hours of PDF tests. Sometimes I would actually study if it was a difficult, the grammatical portion took me the longest. I actually had to study all my grammar again. But I did, and then I took the tests, and I did that for 10 days or something, and then the PDF course was finished, and all the check marks were filled on the TEFL Full Circle website. So that means I fulfilled the TEFL certificate, and they emailed me my certificate, and now I was a certified English teacher, having already done it for 7 years, whatever, but now I was certified. So that was pretty cool. And it was nice having electricity right there. And there was also showers at the water park. It was cold water, but that really didn't bother me that much. It wasn't particularly cold. I think I was there during summer. And I took a shower whenever I felt dirty. And I had showers and electricity and a private park to sleep in every night. And I think one day I was like, I'm not even going to climb up there. I'll just stay in my hammock here. They probably won't even notice me. And they did notice me because I was in a hammock in public. And yeah, of course. So they were like, sorry, we got to kick you out. The park closes at 6 or whatever it was. And I said, okay. And I walked out and they locked everything up and then left. And after they left, I walked around the entire compound, and one of the gates was large enough that I could slip through. So I put my backpack through, and then I slipped through, and then I walked back to my second floor area and finished doing the TEFL test. I remember in the middle of the course, after a few days, I had been staying in that area for a week or so, and I went to that same great noodle restaurant every day, but there was no town nearby, and they were asking me just normal questions the first few days, and then after several days, the owner was like, so are you staying here, in a hotel or something? And I was like, no, honestly, I'm just living in that park. I've been backpacking around, and so right now I just backpack in the park. And she's like, isn't it closed at night? And I was like, it is, but I'm just setting up a hammock and going to sleep, and then yeah, it's just comfortable. I clean up all my trash and everything. She was like, oh, that sounds pretty convenient. And I was like, yeah, it's really nice because I don't have anything to do right now. I'm just traveling. So yeah, it's a good setup. And then she was like, cool. And it was fine. So she was the only one I let in on my secret. And she was pretty cool about it. And she was more friendly to me after that day, actually. I think she was just curious. So it felt like I was keeping her at a distance, which I guess technically I was because I didn't want to say I was illegally sleeping in this park or whatever. But after I told her I was sleeping in the park and I just came to her place for dinner every night, she seemed into the whole, the whole arrangement. She was like, hey, and very excited whenever I came in for my meal. But that was my water park adventure. I got to live in a water park in the middle of a very nice, regular walking park with like flowers everywhere and really nice trees. And they had walking paths of all sorts and they had exercise equipment. It was a great little vacation within my backpacking where I wasn't walking to a new place every day. I kind of let my brain calm down from all the new explorations every day. But after a while, I think I had been there a couple weeks and I was like, oh geez, I only have like 2 weeks left on my visa because I spent a couple weeks here getting my TEFL certificate. So I quite mournfully said goodbye to my water park and I went to the noodle shop and I got more dishes than regular and told her, this is my last day, I'm moving on tomorrow morning. So I just wanted to say goodbye and it's been really nice talking to you. And I think she gave me a little packet of Taiwanese cookies or something and said thanks for coming to our noodle shop. And then I went back to the park, slept, woke up at 9 or 10, the crack of 10 a.m., and I started walking south or west again, something. I don't really know. But I ended up at the beach, so I guess I must have walked east. And there was a huge hiking trail. Miles, tens of miles of hiking trails in this just giant national park. I wonder if it was the national park to the north. Maybe. And I walked like some of it, and then I got tired, and I slept near the reception building, and there was this blonde girl waiting there, and she looked so confused. And I looked like the hoboest, most comfortable person you'd ever see. I was just slouched, tired from my walk, but happy. I had some food and just resting, just looked so comfortable in that area. And she looked so uncomfortable. And I asked if she needed any help getting anywhere. And she said she was trying to get to this tulip field, but she didn't know really where she was or trying to figure out anything. And I showed her my offline maps. And she was like, oh my God, I have no signal right now. What is that? And I showed her where a Wi-Fi hotspot was that was a few minutes away and got her the same offline maps I was using. And she was from Germany, spoke very good English though. And we started talking and hanging out. And she said, well, I'm going to go to this tulip field. Do you want to go with me? And I was like, yeah, sure. And we walked along the miles of trails and we just talked the whole time. It was really fun. She was on a backpacking trip. She was a psychology or psychiatry major, something like that. And we rounded this corner, which I don't know how it happens because you're on a trail, but we didn't see anything. I mean, it was an open air trail and we're on a mountain, but all of a sudden we turned a corner on one of the trails we were walking and it was a mountainside of, I wrote down tulips here, so I'm guessing they were tulips. But they might have been cosmos, those really fluffy ones, but I think they were tulips because they were pretty tall flowers. And there was just 20 or 30 rows of red ones, 20 or 30 rows of yellow ones, 20 or 30 rows of white ones, 20 or 30 rows wide, but thousands of rows deep. Like the whole meadow and plains leading up to the mountain, then up the mountain were all this flower. And it was pretty awe-inspiring. There were windmills, if I'm remembering correctly, like Swiss-looking windmill reconstructions, I think just for the aesthetic. And she was like, well, this is what I was looking for. This is the best thing ever. And I was like, yeah, this is a lot of flowers. And we kept walking and she admired the flowers. And she asked me if I was getting tired because I was carrying my big rucksack. And I was like, no, this is such a great day. Pretty flowers, great hike, get to talk to a pretty girl, hang out with you all day. It's been very fun. And she was like, I'm not pretty, and got all bashful. And then she stared at me real serious. And so I kissed her. And I was so happy. It was such a fulfilling little romantic, pretty moment. And there was no one around because we were a little past the tulips at that point. There was we had just finished all the tulips when that happened. There was a little tree with a bench we could sit by. But we didn't sit down. We just made out under this tree for a while. And then she was leaving that evening. And if she wanted to get to her train, we had to leave after that. And so after we had some fun, we strapped on our packs and held hands and walked happily toward the train station, which was a couple hours away. And that's just what she was doing. She was going to spend all day in this tulip garden and then get back to the train and go back to Germany and continue studying psychiatry. And she asked to trade Facebook information, but it's like she caught herself and she was like, oh, but I don't use it a lot, so we might not talk a lot. And I think she was just letting me know that we weren't starting some kind of long distance relationship. And I was like, yep, that's fine. And we talked a couple times on Facebook. We made it to her train 10 minutes before the train was leaving. And we used my offline maps because I had you have to download different sections, and she hadn't downloaded the section she needed, but I had it on mine. And so we just made it to the subway station. We ambled up to the ticket counter, and she said, I'll just check when my train leaves, then we can hang out. And then she saw this big board, and she was like, oh, it's gone 10. Okay, I have to go. It was so nice meeting you. And we kissed, and she ran off, and she turned around and waved before she went through the turnstile or whatever. And I never saw her again. And we talked a couple times on Facebook, and it was nice, and she was doing fine. And then, that was my short-lived, spontaneous tulip tryst. I think that was the last big thing I did, and I just spent the last week walking north towards Taipei, but I knew I wasn't going to make it. Oh, you know what? No, I guess the last big thing that happened was I got picked up while I was hiking. Yes, because I would have made it. I started hiking north because I was like, well, now I can't go clockwise. I'm never going to make it all the way around the island. But if I start walking north and go past through Hualien, pass through the whole city, I should be able to get counterclockwise around the island to Taipei in time to leave, in time to catch my flight. And so I walked, and I was walking on the highway for a day and a half maybe before a guy pulled over in a truck, or I'm thinking a van actually, and he just said, hey, where are you going? Taipei. Do you want to ride there? Yeah, sure. Okay, thanks. That reminds me, that's how I got to Hualien. I hitchhiked. Because one of the Wiki Voyage articles mentioned that Taiwanese people still hitchhike a lot, and they're very friendly toward hitchhikers. Yeah, so I waited at a turnoff somewhere, and some guy told me to wait somewhere else for a ride, and then when I waited at the place he told me to wait, someone in a sedan picked me up immediately and drove me all the way to Hualien from Taipei. And then, on my way back, some guy in a truck picked me up on the way back from Hualien to Taipei, and he started talking with me and told me I should start a YouTube video channel. And I was like, man, that's a lot of work. I really don't want to take that much time out of my day because I'd have to edit stuff. And he was like, no, but I would love to watch it and you can make money from it. And I was like, I don't know. I don't really need any more money right now. And just traveling is such a valuable experience for me. I enjoy doing that more than any day I've ever made any amount of money. And he was like, yeah, but you can share it with other people. You should do it. And I had to keep being like, no, I appreciate it, but I'm probably not going to start one. But it would be such a good idea. And he really pushed it for a long time, 20 minutes, which is a long time of demurring from starting up a channel and doing a whole bunch of work I didn't really want to do. If I had known about podcasts, who knows, maybe I would have started back then. But I had tried to start a podcast and it didn't just feel right before. It feels right now to be telling these stories and permanently archiving them for as long as the internet lasts. So I never did start up a video channel, but other than that awkward situation where I had to keep being like, great idea, but I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. No, I don't. It was just a nice conversation. He asked me where I had been to, what I visited, all the, what I had done. And I asked him about his life, which I can't help but think it was something with newspapers or something. I like I said, I took very little notes from any of this early on in my travels. I just wasn't recording anything, so I can't really remember. I was just Kino's journeying from one place to the next. But it was still a pleasant talk, as all talks are when you're traveling, and every social interaction is just a fun chat with someone else. And always deeper than you think it's going to be. It always comes down to life motivations. When someone talks to me, anyway, as a traveler, my motivations are on my sleeve. I'm like, this is the best way that I know how to live life. And then the other person will say something like, wow, I don't know if I know my best way to live life. And, they'll figure it out, and I tell them so. But they'll figure it out if they look for their best way to live life, like if they live true to their own values. And some of them are. Some love being newspapermen or psychiatrists or whatever it is. And I love walking in homemade sandals with a rucksack on my back, or right now, talking into a microphone, sharing stories with people. I'm a traveler by nature. It has a few closing notes that I didn't mention before. There were a lot of jets flying over Taiwan at pretty much all hours of the day, several times a day. And I was wondering why there were low-flying jets over Taiwan all the time. It seems like pretty low for the government to do that. And then I found out that they were Chinese jets. All the locals I asked explained they were Chinese jets intimidating Taiwan, basically, by flying over into illegal airspace pretty regularly. That was the last little note I forgot to enter in earlier. So thank you very much for listening. Have a great rest of your day. You can contact me at bitofarambler@gmail.com or all of the socials, and I will talk to you soon.